People always say church is a hospital for the broken, but for Stella, church was a courtroom and she was the judge. From the moment she walked into the auditorium each Sunday, chin slightly raised, Bible clasped to her chest, and voice lifted like an angel during worship, she wore her righteousness like a crown. If anyone didn't know Stella closely, they would swear she was the most holy girl in the choir. Her voice, heavenly. Her dressing, modest to the last hem. Her presence, always visible, always active, always involved. She was a girl who somehow knew everything happening in church. Every scandal, every hidden story, every whisper members thought they had successfully buried beneath church activities. She was the unofficial broadcaster of who did what. The one who could smile at you during service and later shake her head saying, God will judge people like her. And honestly, if you wondered where she learned it from, you didn't need to search too far. She was her mother's daughter. Her mother, Mama Stella, was the church women's leader. Elegant wrapper tied family, scarf always perfectly placed, Bible highlighted with different colors from Genesis to Revelation. If you heard her praying, you'd think angels personally confided in her. But her greatest ministry was not intercession, it was criticism. They called her Assistant Jesus in church. The way she corrected people, you'd think she wrote the commandments herself. The way she analyzed other people's children, you'd think she manufactured hers in heaven with extra holiness. She was the type who would look at a young girl coming to church with a baby and say loudly enough for at least 5 people to hear. This is what happens when girls refuse to close their legs. Our daughters must learn discipline. My Stella will never shame me like this. Everyone knew Mama Stella's voice. Everyone knew her pride in her children being perfect. Everyone knew how she carried her family reputation. Like a fragile glass, she believed God himself must protect for her. And Stella grew up hearing these things so much that she absorbed them like oxygen. She learned early that Christianity wasn't just about loving God. It was about appearing spotless. She learned that sin was something that happened to others. Her family? No. They were the examples. When she got to youth choir age, she wore the same mantle. If someone in church got pregnant out of wedlock, Stella would be among the first to know and the first to quote scriptures like a walking Bible app. Flee from every appearance of sin. Be ye holy. Your body is the temple of God. If someone's marriage was shaking, Stella had commentary. If someone fell into a mistake, she became part of the spiritual analysis committee. She would sit among friends and say, you see Brother Michael's wife? She pretends to be holy, but she's not faithful. I heard things. She would shake her head when she heard about a girl struggling spiritually. You see, some people play with sin. God cannot be mocked. But here's the thing about life. Sometimes, the very stage where you mocked others is where life brings you to perform your own drama. And God, He has a way of humbling those who believe they are too perfect to ever fall. Stella didn't know that yet. For now, she was still the star girl, choir's golden voice, pastor's favorite example of daughters brought up well in the way of the Lord, youth girls leader, role model, mother's pride, the girl people pointed at saying, God bless Mama Stella. She raised her children well. Look at Stella, polite, respectful, spiritual, decent, disciplined. If only they knew how human she truly was beneath all that. If only they knew she was not made of glass, she was made of flesh and blood like everyone she condemned. But life was patient, watching, waiting, and then, slowly, quietly, something shifted. Her closest friend, Bissy, was the opposite of her, free-spirited, fun-loving, and constantly telling Stella, loosen up small, you're too stiff, you're not God. So when Bissy invited her for a simple hangout, she said it was house party and nothing serious. Stella resisted at first. I don't do that kind of place. But pressure, loneliness, and the silent desire to just feel normal for once, to feel like others, pushed her there. It wasn't supposed to be wired, just youth chilling, music, laughter, games, drinks, nothing too serious, until it became serious. Because when you put vulnerable people in careless environment, mistakes don't take long to happen. Someone handed Stella a drink. She rejected it at first. But Bisi giggled, relax now, it's just juice. Except it wasn't. Her head grew light, her thoughts became slow, her guard dropped. Smiles turned to recklessness, boundaries blurred. Everyone was too free. She didn't even realize when she got too comfortable, when attention shifted towards her, when two guys began staying unusually close. There was laughter, dancing, moments she couldn't remember clearly, moments she wished never happened. That night became a blow. Two different moments, two different mistakes in one reckless season of weakness. No force, just vulnerability, carelessness, and an environment she should never have been in. And by the time her senses returned, shame wrapped her like a cloak. How did I get here? Me? Stella? She hated herself. She cried quietly for days. She didn't tell her mother, she didn't tell the church. She just pretended, prayed more, sang louder, smiled wider, hoping guilt would disappear. Instead, something else appeared. Pregnancy. It wasn't church that discovered first. It was the missed periods, then the quiet panic, then the fear swallowing her until she couldn't breathe. The day Mama Stella found out, she froze. Then slowly, her world shattered. She confronted Stella. What is this? Who got you pregnant? Stella broke down. Everything came out. The house party, the influence, the drink, the blood memory, the confusion. And the final stab? Mommy, I don't know who is responsible. That sentence stabbed deeper than a knife. Mama Stella didn't feel anger at first. She felt something far worse. Humiliation, fear, reality. Everything she used to say about other girls was now her address. She sat on the floor, quiet, tears streaming, heart shaking. It wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't church gist. It wasn't spiritual commentary. This time, it was her home, her daughter, her name, her pride. And for the first time ever, Mama Stella shut up. No more sharp criticism, just brokenness. Mother and daughter cried together. Mama Stella, humbled by pain, walked herself to the pastor's office and confessed. The mighty assistant Jesus walked in quietly, sat down, and said softly, "My daughter is pregnant." No drama, no spiritual grammar, just truth. Silence filled the room, no judgment, no shouting, just the heavy reality that sometimes even the strongest people fall harder than anyone expects. Then the church leadership invited Stella and her mother to the office. 3 people sat there, the resident pastor, the assistant pastor, and the head of the women's fellowship. People who had once hugged Stella proudly, people who once called her our star girl. Now their faces were calm, but heavy. The pastor cleared his throat. "Stella, how are you?" That question alone nearly broke her, because she wasn't fine. She was falling apart inside. I'm okay, sir," she whispered, even though her voice betrayed her. The assistant pastor gently leaned forward. "Stella, your mom already told us what happened." Her hands shook. Her heart pounded. The pastor spoke gently. "We are not here to destroy you, but we must follow church discipline. You will step down from choir ministry. You will take time away from leadership roles. This season is for reflection, restoration, and accountability." Those words cut deeply, suspended from the place she loved, from the ministry that once defined her identity. She nodded slowly. "I understand," because truthfully, she did. Discipline wasn't punishment, it was consequence, it was reality. And reality doesn't disappear because you cry. Outside that office, news traveled faster than wildfire. One person whispered it, another person added extra, another exaggerated small details. Within days, the church wasn't just aware, they were buzzing. Have you noticed Stella? Something is wrong. She doesn't look herself lately. Some brushed it off confidently. Stella? Never. Maybe she's tired. She's busy with work. Please don't talk nonsense. But rumors in church move fast. They don't need confirmation to spread. And the truth always has a way of forcing its way to the surface, even when people try to cover it. Stella started sitting at the back sometimes, started looking distracted. Even her dressing subtly changed. Less vibrant, less joyful, more careful. Then suddenly, she stopped coming to church regularly. This was the same girl who once mocked others for being unstable spiritually. Weeks passed. People started whispering louder. This time, not just random whispers, concern, suspicion, curiosity, and of course, judgment. Because in church, people rarely know how to handle a fall with compassion. They investigate it, analyze it, spread it, debate it, but hardly sit beside the fallen quietly. And then, the news dropped like thunder. Stella, the perfect Stella, the voice of the choir, Mama Stella's pride, was pregnant out of wedlock. The loudest and most conversation-stirring part of it all was that she could not identify who the father of her unborn child was. The same mouth that once praised her began to say, Jesus, how? This life. Her sister Jesus' daughter? Pregnant? And she cannot even name the father. What was she doing? You see why you should never trust anybody's spirituality? Women whispered with hands covering their mouth. Men shook their heads in disbelief. Youth members stared like it was a movie. And Mama Stella, the vocal critic, the one who once spoke with such boldness when others fell, silence swallowed her. Humiliation wrapped around her neck like a scarf. The same seat where she used to correct other people's daughters now burned beneath her. The same church members she once lectured now had something to lecture her about. People avoided meeting her eyes, some out of pity, many out of satisfaction. Because let's be honest, sometimes human beings don't just see a fall, they enjoy it. Especially when it happens to someone who once thought they were above everyone else. Weeks passed, then months, and gradually the shock transformed into a strange calm. People no longer gasped when her name was mentioned. They simply sighed. The church moved on, as churches always do. But Stella's life didn't move on. She was still learning to breathe through guilt, still realizing that falling doesn't make you less loved by God. But it sure changes how humans treat you. She had always thought judgment sounded like words, criticism, gossip, Bible quotations thrown like stones. But she learned that the worst judgment was not loud at all. It was the way people stopped greeting her with warmth, the way smiles disappeared when she entered the room, the way eyes followed her, yet no one walked close enough to hold her hand. Yet somewhere in the middle of tears, something unexpected began to grow in her heart. Understanding. Understanding of weakness, compassion, understanding that righteousness is not a performance, understanding that nobody stands strong by their own power. She remembered every person she ever judged, every girl, every rumor she once repeated, every harsh comment she made with spiritual confidence, every God will judge them she carelessly threw. And she cried, not because of shame anymore, but because now she finally understood them. She understood what it meant to be scared. She understood what it meant to be human. She understood how easy it is to fall and how hard it is to get back up. She understood all those mothers she once criticized, all those daughters she once analyzed, all those families she once judged. They were never statistics. They were human beings carrying pain and confusion just like this. She no longer saw herself as the good girl. She saw herself as someone desperately in need of grace, the same grace she once denied others. Mama Stella was learning too, painfully. She stopped sitting in her usual front row seat where she always observed the spiritual temperature of the service. Her chair stayed empty, and in church, an empty chair sometimes speaks louder than a sermon. But she came, late, very late. She entered quietly, tying her scarf lower than usual, like someone trying to hide inside herself. Every step she took felt like walking through fire. Conversations paused, greetings froze halfway. Some women forced smiles, others didn't even try. Her presence shifted the air. This was the same woman who once corrected everyone. Now, everyone was correcting her with their eyes. But the real drama wasn't in church, it was at home. The house had become a battlefield of tears, anger, denial, shame, and long, painful silence. For weeks after the news broke, Mama Stella could barely look at Stella. She would sit on the edge of the bed at night, staring at the wall, shaking her leg restlessly like someone whose chest was too full of unspoken pain. One day, she finally broke, not gently, not calmly. It came out like a storm that had been trapped behind a closed door. She walked into Stella's room, slammed the door, and for the first time in Stella's life, she didn't sound like women's leader. She sounded like a wounded mother. Why? Just one word, soft but heavy. Why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to yourself? To this family? Stella didn't answer immediately. Her hands were locked to her stomach, her eyes swollen from crying, but tears still managed to find fresh ways to fall. Mommy, I didn't plan this. I'm sorry, she whispered. Of course, you didn't plan it. Mama Stella snapped. Nobody plans shame, nobody plans disgrace. But you always spoke like someone who could never fall. You always carried yourself like you were above temptation. Now, look at us. Then suddenly she stopped. Her voice cracked, her shoulders dropped. She sat on the bed and cried, real broken, painful tears, the kind that comes from fear. Fear of failure, fear that if her children ever stumbled, she wouldn't survive it. Now, here they were, living her worst nightmare. But instead of feeling like enemies, they looked like two women sitting in the middle of a storm they didn't know how to escape. I don't even know how to pray, Mama Stella whispered. Me, women's leader, prayer coordinator, intercessor. Right now, God feels far. Stella wiped her face slowly. Mommy, God feels far to me too. I'm so sorry. Silence, but it wasn't the normal angry silence anymore. This one felt honest, painful, but freeing. Because two proud people had finally admitted they were weak. And weakness is where humility begins. Meanwhile, in church, a strange change quietly began. Youth members whispered less harshly. Some people who once hated her now felt uncomfortable, as if something in their conscience had been touched. People who once laughed at other people's mistakes began to think twice. Because Stella wasn't a stranger, she wasn't one of those unserious girls. She wasn't from a wayward family. She was one of their best. And if it could happen to someone like her, then maybe perfection wasn't as real as they thought. Maybe everyone was one decision away from being a topic too. Maybe nobody was ever truly as strong as they pretended. But the real turning point came months later. Stella's pregnancy had grown. Her work had changed. Her body carried its visible truth publicly. She finally returned to church one Sunday. Not to sing, not to lead, just to sit, just to breathe the same air again. She expected stares. She expected whispers. They came, but something else happened too. Something more powerful than condemnation. Something unexpected. In the middle of worship, a teenage girl quietly left her seat, walked to where Stella sat, and hugged her from behind. Then another. Then another. Then a woman who had also once been suspended years back. the one people never let forget her mistake, walked up to and held her hand. Suddenly, without announcement, without planning, without direction, people began to gather around Stella. Not everyone, not the entire church, but enough for the atmosphere to shift, enough to tell the world, we will not leave her alone to drown. Tears flowed from her eyes, from her mother's eyes, from people who once hated her silently, from girls who once felt she judged them, but now saw she was just like them, human. And that morning, something broke in the church. Not discipline, not decency, not righteousness. Pride broke. For the first time, church remembered something basic. Forgiveness heals deeper than humiliation. Grace teaches stronger than judgment. Love speaks louder than scandal. And Stella, she did not get back her reputation that day. She got back something more valuable, her faith, her will to live beyond people's opinion. And as she sat there crying, holding her stomach surrounded not by mockery but unexpected love, she finally whispered, "God, thank you. I thought you were gone." But he had never left. She had only been listening to the wrong voices. 9 months sounds long until you are the one carrying it. Stella's pregnancy journey was not like other women's. There were no baby showers, no joyful photo shoots, no excited gender reveal, just quiet mornings, solo feet, emotional swings, and a constant mixture of hope and fear of life after the child. Some nights, she would hold her belly and whisper, "Little one, I don't know who you will become, but I promise you won't grow up in shame like I did this past month. I will protect you." And strangely, that child she once cried about became her strength, because sometimes God gives redemption wrapped in responsibility. Meanwhile, Mama Stella softened into a completely different woman. She cooked for girls in church who were struggling. She visited families silently. She prayed differently now, without superiority, without showmanship. She prayed like someone who knew she needed mercy too. And quietly, slowly, something unexpected began to happen in church. Watching Stella and her mother broke something in people. Judgment didn't taste sweet anymore. Mocking didn't feel spiritual anymore. Instead, empathy started growing roots. The night Stella went into labor, rain poured heavily. The kind of rain that forces you to pray without planning to. It started calmly, slight abdominal tightening, mild discomfort, but by midnight, pain roared like thunder. Mama Stella ran from room to room shaking, trying to stay in control, but failing miserably. "Jesus, please, Jesus, please." Stella clung to her mother's hands like a lifeline. For the first time in her life, Mama Stella wasn't praying as a church leader. She wasn't praying to prove spirituality. She prayed like a desperate mother. The rush to the hospital, minutes turned to hours, pain deepened, complications surfaced. Doctors whispered, nurses moved urgently, fear thickened the room. The pressure was not just medical, it was spiritual, emotional, psychological. Mama Stella knelt on cold hospital ties, praying quietly, "God, please, give my daughter life. Don't punish us with tragedy, please." Hours later, the nurse stepped out smiling. "Congratulations, it's a baby boy." For the first time in months, Mama Stella laughed, a deep, emotional, relieved laugh soaked in tears. The baby was placed in her arms first, soft, warm, innocent. The most beautiful miracle wrapped in vulnerability. When Stella finally held him, she didn't see scandal. She didn't see shame. She didn't see failure. She saw purpose, and quietly, the biggest realization hit her. God had not abandoned her. Grace had simply taken a different shape. But then, something else happened. News travels quickly when a baby is born. By the second day, church members began visiting in small groups. Women who once avoided her now cautiously entered the room with food, gifts, and smiles, unsure of how to act, but willing to try. The youth choir came too. Some hugged her, some cried, some apologized, not because they were guilty individually, but because they represented a church that had once been louder in condemnation than compassion. Even pastor came. He didn't preach, he didn't analyze, he didn't question. He simply carried the baby gently and whispered, "Welcome, son. You came with a message." Because whether people liked it or not, that child was a reminder. A reminder that God still works through broken vessels. A reminder that grace can be louder than shame. A reminder that failure is not the end. It is sometimes how God restarts a heart. Then the most surprising moment happened. Mama Stella stood up in that room, cleared her throat, and did something nobody expected. She confessed, not to disgrace herself, not to defend Stella, but to free herself. She looked at Pastor, then the women, then the youth, and said softly, "For years, I thought being spiritual meant being perfect and policing everyone else. I thought judging others made me strong. I was wrong. Pain taught me compassion. My daughter's journey humbled me. If you ever feel tempted to look down on anyone, remember me. Remember my daughter. Please, let this church be a place of restoration, not humiliation." The room went silent. People felt sober because that wasn't a speech. It was repentance, and repentance changes atmosphere. Months later, the baby grew healthy, cute, chubby, smiling like peace itself. People who once avoided Stella now carried the child happily after service, slowly, gently, wisely. Stella returned to church, not to the choir immediately, not to a microphone. She returned as a worshiper, a listener, someone who understood God deeply, not from the comfort of perfection, but from the reality of mercy. When the church finally reinstated her, not because of pressure, not because of pity, but because discipline had done its work, she didn't rush to the spotlight. She stood behind the choir quietly, eyes closed, voice trembling with gratitude as she sang, "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." And the church, they didn't clap because she could sing. They cried because they could feel it. Her voice had changed. It wasn't just musical anymore. It carried testimony. It carried humility. It carried God. And what about Mama Stella? She never returned to being Assistant Jesus. She became something better. A safe woman. Women now came to her, not out of fear, but because they knew she understood. They trusted her. She prayed differently for them, not from a throne, but from the ground, where humans truly belong when they come before God. In church, it's easy to point fingers. It's easy to gossip. It's easy to act holy. But God doesn't build his kingdom on pride. He builds it on broken people who understand grace. Because the day judging others becomes sweeter than loving them, that church has already lost Jesus. And sometimes, God allows stories like Stella's so we remember no one is above falling and no one is beyond redemption. If this story has blessed you, kindly share it with others. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.